Welcome to What the Heck's, your source for Warhammer Underworlds and under 30 matchups that you definitely should have been ready for. I'm Davy, your co-host, and with me, as always, I've got Phil. How are you doing tonight, Phil?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I'm recovering from some sickness.
You and I both ran into some sickness. I think it was just in keeping with the worm spat theme from last episode.
Yeah, old grandfather decided to bless us.
Yeah. Is blessing the world right now a little bit. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But we're going to be talking this episode about since we are or were or maybe going to Adepticon, but in general, any tournament you're going to, if it's a large local, if it's Adepticon, ATC, whatever the case, how you kind of go about reading what's out there, and we're gonna obviously use the current meta, the current field out there as our specific. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit. But before that, a little bit of context. We're recording on the 11th of March, and we got to see Morgwaith's Blade Coven, the Daughters of Cain warband. Just saw the images of them, no rules yet. Phil, what'd you think?
They look pretty great. Both the Crushers and the Blade Coven. It's like, wow, they stepped up dynamic models, and especially when you compare them to their AOS lines, which are relatively static. So,
right.
I thought they were great. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree that there is the whip, carrying the whip and shield mask one. What is that in AOS?
That's a Sister of Slaughter, I believe is what they're called.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. The movement that they're getting on models. I think I'm a little bit of a broken record with that sort of thing, but pretty impressive. I'd be interested to see if that model can withstand the rigors of gameplay, but
yeah.
But they've been pretty good with those. And then I really like I like the leader, and I like there's the one that is crouching, just kind of got her daggers held low. That's a really cool pose. So good stuff all around. Really cool. And excited to see how they play. Right? Like,
oh yeah.
I think you and I were talking that might be an interesting pairing, like speedy glass cannony. I'm assuming the Daughters will be at least somewhat similar to Reavers with speed and not a lot of durability, and have them go up against their release mates, the Crushes, and who are big, presumably slow and tough, and hit like trucks. Just going on pure model look,
for sure. Well, and knowing something about their background too. I mean, that's pretty much. Well, I guess we shouldn't use AOS as a comparison, but maybe some of the lore, knowing that, the elves are, quick, and they're all about murder and blood and killing things, and orcs just want to have a good time and rough each other up. So I think no matter what, we can know that they are both going to be very aggro, and that's something that's a little bit lacking, I think, from the game right now. So hopefully. Sure. That'll be a nice influx for people who like to just roll lots of dice.
Yeah. That should be cool. I'm interested because we've seen some parallels between warband types. Like both dwarf warbands had a resilience card where no more than 1 damage.
Sure.
Like both Khorne warbands had that. So I wonder if there's going to be some parallels you could draw from the Iron Jaws or Iron Skulls warband. If there's some mechanics that'll make the jump or something like that, like the Too Dumb to Die or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Maybe. Or cunning but brutal and brutal but cunning.
Sure. Right,
you just straight up transplant those cards into this seemingly maybe stronger warband, and I'd be scared.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be cool. Anyway, we'll talk a little more about that when they come around. I think I've got a good recommended listening for the Blade Coven, but we'll see.
So, all right.
We'll do some quick community shout outs here. This one is a little bit tied to what I've been doing lately. I managed to get out. We had some new additions to our local crew, Josh, Bryan, and Skylar, who just got into the game in a big way, and they've been a real enthusiastic part of our league. It's been super awesome to have them out. They were having a Adepticon prep hangout, and I popped by and played some games with each of them, and had a really good time. And that was just that random thing where we were posting our event on Facebook. They saw it in passing and got connected, um, and so wanted to give those guys a shout out, but in a more general sense to all the people out there who are working on their local, who are running those events and putting things on Facebook and stuff. The things that you did that got this crew connected to us, and vice versa. The people who are doing that work out there are really kind of the backbone of the hobby. Growing it at that level so that people get into it and enthusiastic enough that they can go to the big events that we sometimes probably give more attention to than we should in the podcasting and world.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
So, and it's been mentioned in couple of different places, but No Gets No Glory had a really great article about well, I guess self-care was a term that came up a few times, but just being in the right headspace and figuring out how to get the most from your games on like a more, I don't know, cerebral level, spiritual level. I don't know, like it's almost like a mental health article on how to approach the game, and I thought that was really cool. So if you
I
haven't read it yet, you should.
Yeah, so I haven't read it yet. Was it sort of more focused around like kind of remembering that it's a game and like trying to have fun with it and making sure that like your experience is still entertainment and not just like grinding and
Yeah, and setting your expectations, like knowing what you're trying to get out of it, and
okay, sure,
so
yeah,
and just some valuable stuff to make sure that you are enjoying it because it is a game, and then but it's also it's something we put a lot of time into. So like just matching your goals and matching your efforts with what you want to get out of it, I guess would be the
cool. That's super
but
cool.
yeah, he's a very eloquent writer in general. He's one of my most laugh out loud blogs that I read, and he did a great job with this too. So shouts there. As far as what the heck is going on with you, I already mentioned it. I popped over, played with some of the local guys. That is leading into week 7 of our league. I think we're counting those games for it. I don't know if they've sent results or anything like that, but we're coming to the close of our league. I've been totally addicted to Wormspat. I've been having a ton of fun playing with them. I was talking to Tony Field, and I think he was saying that he was feeling a little burned out on the meta, and it was just kind of fun to have a weird puzzle to put together, and that's what they feel like. So I've been trying different play styles with them and really enjoying them.
Awesome.
What about you?
Well, I haven't really done a whole lot in the hobby lately because I've been pretty sick. But right before I got sick, I put together an Objective Eyes deck that I got to try out, and for similar reasons to Wormspat, whereas like I've been pretty much exclusively playing Hrothgorn for a few weeks, where every game I was playing Hrothgorn with the same build, trying to focus down an idea for Adepticon, which may not be going to now. But so I just wanted a break and something for the local league, and it was a lot of fun. And I think people had a hard time with it, just because they weren't sure what exactly I was doing. And that was kind of cool to give a different challenge for people to try and deal with. So I think I might try it out again. It did really well, but I think it caught people off guard. So if they see it coming, I'd like to see how they can sort of come back at it now that they know what it's doing.
Have a sense of some of the things that it can do. Yeah, that's a good point. There's something that is going on with you that we have overlooked a few times. We've alluded to the fact that maybe as of the recording of this podcast, Adepticon is still scheduled to go down. I think they're offering free refunds for anybody who elects not to travel because of novel coronavirus COVID-19. and but there's a lot of Illinois and Chicago events getting shut down. So it's quite possible by the time you hear this, Adepticon will be canceled. We each have our own reasons for not going. I'm still on the fence. I work in pre-hospital healthcare and have some ethical concerns about whether it's a responsible thing for me to do there. But Phil, if you can't go to Adepticon, how are you going to earn your spot to the Grandmasters?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I've already earned my spot to the Grandmasters
Whoop
by
whoop.
not actually earning it and instead just lucking into it. So, you know, uh, it's sometimes better to be lucky than to be good.
Well,
Um,
you had to get the glass somehow. So, uh,
fair enough. Um, but yeah, so I was one of the, I believe it's 10 people that was drawn from the first drawing
yeah.
to go. So I do have a spot. Um, at least at the time that they offered it, I said, "Yep, I can definitely go."
Mhm.
I'm hoping that by September, all of this stuff that's sort of potentially threatening large group gatherings is sort of blown over, and we can just go about our business without worrying.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so for now anyway, I am planning to attend Nova and play in the Grandmasters tournament, and we'll see how that goes.
That is awesome. In theory, I'm going as well. I got the card and the what I'm told is supposed to be enough. Although every time I send something to the official GW um, address, I've never received a reply. So a little bit
Yeah,
shaky ground there. But it'd be cool if we had a what the heck's delegation going. So
yeah, for sure. And I
and
mean,
hopefully not have the both of us end up at the very bottom of the pile.
well, I mean, there's got to be somebody else drawn to go who we can maybe beat, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, yeah, that ATC win, I would hope should count, you know, if for nothing else, because that's actually the first ever uh, team tournament, at least in America, that they did for Underworlds. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's the
grand.
first in the world, but so I think it would be good for that to be recognized. But
Yeah,
I don't get to make these rules, so
sure. Before we jump into the main thing, you had the idea of a little side note, as since we're talking about the concerns with COVID-19 and such, you wanted to bring something up.
yeah. So we've got some pretty standard tournament etiquette. Just I think this is probably pretty standard across most games, where you would shake hands and you recognize that, like, hey, it's okay for you to move my models or whatever, and like generally, there's, with it being a physical game and you're sitting just across the table from people, that um, you're generally going to be animated and dealing with another person and interacting. And I think that's all great, and that should continue. But just a couple points that I have been thinking about lately, that if you are going to go to a tournament like Adepticon, just keep in mind that, like, it's probably a good idea not to shake hands. That's a good way to end up, sharing stuff that you probably don't want to be sharing. And I think you can definitely still be a good sport, and you can definitely make sure that you let your opponent know. You just don't have to do it through a handshake.
Hmm.
Um, and as the receiving end, if somebody says, like, no, I don't want to shake hands, know that they're not doing it to be a poor sport. They're doing it because they're probably thinking about these same things.
Yeah.
Um, and then sort of along those lines, also, if you're gonna need to move models, like you use distraction or something, it's probably best to ask your opponent to move the model where you want it to go.
Hmm.
Obviously, some of that is up to personal discretion as to how comfortable are you. Do you think you're going to have a chance to wash your hands pretty soon after your game or whatever? Do you have hand sanitizer with you? But um, it's, it's so easy to just sort of say, hey, I want to, move him to that hex, and just point to it and they can move it, and you don't even have to worry about that sort of stuff. Um,
Yeah, I've started doing that more and more, just in general, just to build a habit. I
sure.
think at first it occurred to me seeing, I think, actually watching the last year's Adepticon finals, Amon had like really beautifully painted models, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess I wouldn't want to be handling someone else's like, you know, commission painted stuff
Yeah.
without their
Yeah.
permission. So it's not a bad habit to be in.
Yeah.
As far as the shaking hands, I'm going to propose that we all just like Wakanda salute each other.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. All right. There you go. Good alternative.
cross fists, little head nod,
Good other
and
option.
yeah,
Um, and then just because, with cons being what they are, and with tournaments being what they are, and you're usually going to be, sat down playing for extended periods, it's generally a good idea to, if you're going to like eat or drink anything between games or even during games, try to wash your hands if you can. I know it probably sounds like, all right, yep, everybody's telling me to wash my hands, but like really that's going to be the best thing you can do to make sure that um, we don't spread anything around. Um,
yeah,
these are, it's super fun to get together with all these people and play these games, but with it being a physical medium like this, it is a risk, and it's just, if we want tournaments like this to be able to continue in times like these, we're going to have to take, a few extra steps, but I think
sure,
it's
yeah.
all doable.
Yeah, and it's we often it is often remarked upon how cool and supportive a community Underworlds has been, and this is just another way for us to be supportive of each other's. Take care of your health and take care of the health of your fellow gamers. So,
Yeah.
um, but speaking of ACon or whatever your next tournament is, you got to get ready for it in more ways than one. So we're going to be talking about how to get ready for matchups. Are you ready for main topic here? You think?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. So we're gonna be talking kind of a general approach, and then we've sort of broken it down into what we think is sort of the top of the pile right now. What is the field, and what are some of the oddballs? And when I talk about top of the pile or the cut in the field, that came from a conversation I had with Mike Carlin, who was talking about when you're building a deck. And when we say preparing, it's selecting your faction, building your deck, and then getting the practice are all the ways you're preparing. But he says he was telling me like it feels like right now you have to be prepared to beat the war bands in the cut, which is to say, the generally perceived most powerful war bands or most popular war bands. So right now we'll get into some of the specifics later, but maybe your Grimwatch and your Thorns, you need to be able to beat those, but you also have to be able to beat the field, which is to say you need to be flexible enough to beat things that are not necessarily like it's not good enough to say, okay, here's the top four war bands. Can I beat them? You have to be prepared for more than that. And you will potentially see a lot of those in the field. Like I can say in my last Adepticon experience, what I saw, I mean, obviously this is in Night Vault, but I saw Reavers, Mollog, Skaven, and Sepulchral Guard. So I had a really weird mix of opponents there, and you could face those, and if you're not prepared for the field, then you won't even make the cut. So,
Yeah, definitely.
um, in a more general sense, from your starting, you should be thinking, right when you're first starting, like, what am I going to do against, aggro playstyle? What am I going to do against objective playstyle? What am I going to do against control playstyle? And then when you have a general sense of that, then you can make that more specific as far as that goes. We were talking about some different ways to manage as we talk through these matchups with your own deck selection and play style. You should be thinking of different ways to beat a particular matchup, and we try to classify it in a few different categories. And obviously, anytime you play, they're going to overlap a little bit. But you want to run us down some of those?
Sure. Yeah. So some pretty sort of general ideas of like what you can be thinking about doing is, are you going to be out pacing your opponent or outracing them. This I think comes up a lot in like aggro into aggro matchups, traditional Shadespire matchup. You know that both sides are going to get to do something. The question is like who's going to end up on top, and I think that can look like an are you just trying to outrace your opponent? You're just trying to do your game plan. You stick to it. You and you just hope for the best and come out on top because you can't necessarily stop your opponent's game plan.
Yeah,
Um,
I think often we'll see someone, like Grimwatch will often have this kind of plan, like they just burst scoring so fast, and they have such a high scoring cap that maybe they just like, what, I'm just going to do my thing. You try to stop me. I'm not going to worry so much about you. You try and it's on you to stop
yeah,
me.
yeah,
I think the other place I saw this, or it reminds me of, is back in Night Vault when you and I were both trying out some control decks, and I was taking Steel City's Surgical Steel Hearts, Mike Carlin's
yeah,
build. So like a control Steel Hearts, and you had control Mollog, and you and I were kind of in a similar way. We were in a race, but it was like this standoff control race, and it was the idea of like, okay, like if I stick to my game plan and you stick to yours, who's going to win? Um, and so it was the idea, like if you think that you can just stick to your particular game plan and still come out on top, then that's what this particular
yeah,
strategy would be.
yeah. And I guess now that I think about it some more, although I said like this is aggro into aggro, I think this actually might be almost any time where you have the same strategy going into each other. Because ultimately, like because there's not that counterplay necessarily. I mean, control gets a little weird, but we can talk more about that. But like, if you're doing aggro into objectives, by definition, by trying to be aggro, you're kind of trying to deny the objective player from holding objectives,
Hmm.
and vice versa. They're trying to like stop aggro from getting their kills. But
Hmm.
if you have objectives into objectives or aggro into aggro, both aggro players are going to get to do what they want. And if you're
Hmm.
doing objectives into objectives, you kind of are both going to get to do what you want, except that there's going to be that fight over that third objective,
Hmm.
depending on how the board gets set up.
Hmm.
Um, but I think we kind of end up seeing that a lot right now in like Thorn's Grimwatch, which is one of those cut matchups. And I think we see Thorns fall short a lot, because Grimwatch have that huge burst score when they um, can get those crazy turns of In the Name of the King and Tempt Victory and
Swift
Swift
capture,
Capture into uh,
combo strike, great
yep,
gains.
yep, yep, and
Yeah.
they get it all going. They get 10, 11 glory in the turn, and that's like, well, uh, good
See
luck.
ya. Yeah.
Um,
Well, you mentioned denial, and we kind of think, and this is not necessarily purely a control play style, but that's another sort of archetype that we're talking about. And I would say that specifically, again, say the objective matchup, like I'm building with the idea that uh, I'm putting specific cards in that will allow me to move or shift objectives. I think this is why you see Restless Prize so often, is that even in decks that aren't doing a lot with objectives, Restless Prize or Mischievous Spirits are showing up in there, and those are almost purely for a denial thing. So
yeah,
that's people saying like, "Hey, I'm going to try this to my strategy to beat this thing is denial, and maybe destroying objectives. Like maybe you lean harder into that. Maybe if you're concerned with aggro, I'm going to deny by including more health upgrades and Dwarden resilience, or whatever the case may be.
yeah, for sure. And I think, um, like you mentioned, that control leans pretty heavily into denial. And I think in some ways that's the whole point of control. I mean, that's kind of why it's called control. You're taking control of the game and making sure that
Hmm.
you do what you want and your opponent can't do what they want to do. Um, but I think it's worth pointing out that with denial, you inherently are adding some risk, because and we can probably talk about this more as we get through the cut in the field, but you don't want to seed your deck too heavily towards denying one specific thing.
Mm,
Um, this can kind of come up in like how much objective denial can you put in a deck before it becomes a hindrance when you go up against control or aggro.
right.
Um, I think a classic example would be like, hey, I brought all this stuff to keep things off of objectives, and oh, look, I'm going into, full aggro Hrothgorn.
Right.
Hmm. Uh, those power cards are now just dead. Like,
Sure.
unless you built it so that playing those denial cards also somehow score you glory, which I think is actually where objective destruction is really strong right now.
Hmm.
Um, but but unless they actually further your goals, then there's the potential that you've built a deck that in certain matchups is kind of useless.
Sure. I mean, I think a great example is Warding Scroll. It's a universal from
Oh,
Night Vault
sure.
upgrade discard to just automatically cancel a spell. Incredibly powerful. I've used it once or twice. Put it in decks where I felt like uh, curse breakers were just so prevalent that I needed them, needed that extra help. But that's a great example of a card that is 100% dead into quite a few matchups. So
Yeah. Well,
um,
and that maybe goes to what John said in our last episode, where he was saying magic really is almost its own play style.
mhm,
But really, only one warband does it well. So
sure.
building denial around it is, as you said, super super risky. Um, but if you really thought curse breakers were going to be the thing to beat, maybe it's worth it. But I think generally you'll see a mixed enough field that's pretty. Yeah.
And then the other strategy, and this is perhaps slightly questionable as a strategy we put there is dodge. So you're going to outrace, you're going to deny, or you're going to dodge. And by dodge, we just mean hope you don't face that. Like you might say, man, this not only is this matchup bad, but I have to sacrifice too many things for it to not be bad. Um, but maybe you make the meta call and say, you know what? Uh, I don't think that's going to be out there. Like I think I've got a weakness to all out fast. Like Reaver or Godsworn aggro. I just don't think I'm going to see it often enough, so I'm not going to take the extra precautions against that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's partially, it might be dodges, and I hope I don't play against it, or it might just be like, okay, if I play against it, I'm going in with the understanding that I'm, maybe a 40-60 or a 35-65 against me, and I just have to hope to get lucky enough to power through that one.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think this can be a valid strategy when we're in the field portion
mhm,
of the game where
sure.
we're thinking, okay, what am I seeing as the field? What am I thinking as like it's going to be there but not in super high numbers and it's not going to probably make it to day 2. I think
Mhm.
those are the kinds of things that if you feel like you have trouble against, you can just plan to dodge it and hope for the best.
Yeah, you should probably not plan to dodge something that is expected to make the cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if you're saying, you know what, Grimwatch, I have to dodge that, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. Come if it could happen. You could luck out and not face Grimwatch in the day 1, and you maybe make it to day 2 in a big
Sure.
tournament. I can
Yeah, yeah.
almost guarantee you though that if that happens, you are gonna face Grimwatch on day 2. So it's it, at that point, I think you have to start questioning whether or not you can really get away with what you've got.
Right. Yeah, and actually, to reach back to our previous episode as well, John, when Reese was talking about, it's a little bit of a rock paper scissors out there right now, uh,
Yeah.
and you may be making the call that, okay, I'm paper. I don't think there's a whole lot of scissors out there. If you know your main weakness is to control, and you don't feel like there's a lot of people playing control, maybe that's maybe you're okay with making that be your dodge. So, and it almost feels. I mean, that's what I've been finding is as I play against more and more different opponents and war bands, I keep finding like oh man, I have a big blind spot or weak spot against this particular warband, and it may not be possible to adequately cover every single matchup, and that's probably a good thing for the game. Like if you had something that was 65% chance out of the gate to win against every other warband, well, that wouldn't be great.
Yeah.
It might be Grimwatch, but no,
Yeah.
no, I'm joking. They're not. I don't think they're anywhere close to that favorite, and they have plenty of stuff. But
Yeah.
I think that covers like general approach. We're gonna kind of crash through some of what we think is out there in the cut, the field, and wild cards or oddballs, depending.
Yeah.
How about something from the cut that you think is worth planning for?
So I think so. I'll start here because it's what I've been playing, and I think Hrothgorn is definitely something that's in the cut. And I think that for a couple of reasons. One, and this is sort of a strange numbers thing, but I think if any one warband gets played enough by just by the sheer math of it, they inherently become part of the cut.
Mm-hmm.
Like there will be somebody who plays them well, or a number of somebodies that play them well, and they will have enough like good matchups. Molag has been this way for a long time, where in Nightvault, I should say, where there were so many people playing him that even if he's not like the world beater that some people were afraid he was for a while, um, he's gonna still place well just through sheer numbers, and
And you're gonna see them.
yeah, you have to face him. So,
Yeah.
so I think Hrothgorn is the same way. Although I personally think there's roughly two different ways that Hrothgorn gets played, and that kind of makes it a little bit harder to plan for.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Tell me about those two ways. I think as I've been playing people who I've not yet played, and they put Hrothgorn down. I'm like, ooh, I know what Phil's doing with these guys, or I know what our bud Jeff Osborne is doing, but I don't know what you're doing specifically, and that makes that first round in the best of three pretty dicey. What are you seeing as the two?
Yeah. So I think probably the most common is to be playing him as a hunter centric aggro build. You're basically using him kind of like a mini Molag with more tech, just because a lot of the hunter stuff, like the hunter quarry mechanic, ends up giving you some really interesting tech. Um, like hunter's reflexes, for instance, is just bonkers.
Yeah.
Um, and so, although it's played as aggro, he's still very disruptive in that way. And so I think an aggro build is going to be very common. He's going to want to just come and smash faces, and he does it pretty well. He's speed 4 to start, and he hits really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think probably the most common way. I don't know what you've seen playing against more people who are playing him, but that's sort of my impression.
I think I'm skewed because you have played a more control style,
Yeah.
and so I keep expecting that and deploying as if that might be the case, and then having Hrothgorn just sprint at my face.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
But as you said, and this is what I've been trying to do, is that I think he can lean pretty well into control, as his sort of other style, and it's really almost a flex, is sort of an aggro
sure.
control. But because he has a really strong in-faction score off of objective destruction or flipping, which is
Mm-hmm.
unique to them, and some really easy just score, like for doing nothing cards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's got some really strong passive glory, and he can score off of objective destruction. So
Yeah.
people can sort of do the control denial game with Hrothgorn, and then as soon as you are like, oh man, I've got to come and stop him from doing that stuff, he's going to then be able to whip out his hunting knife and be like, all right, 4 damage time. Let's, you
Yeah.
know.
Whichever build they go for, it's really difficult to stop him from powering up because of that passive glory you're talking about. Like he often has ways to apply 2 to 3 upgrades before you're really engaged, and if they're the right 2 or 3 upgrades, man, it is bad times. For me with Hrothgorn, what I've found is that I've occasionally had some success in the outrace. If I was running a control, I'm gonna sit back and it's sort of denying the aggro or outracing the control, um, or or getting right up in his face right away, and getting enough damage and enough pressure on early that those that once the other upgrades start coming on, he's not totally out of reach. Um, so those have been the 2 strategies I've found. On you being on the receiving end, what have you found to be effective options?
So, at least in the way that I've been playing him, outrace hasn't really come up. It's usually when I've lost with Hrothgorn, it's usually because he's been blitzed. And then since he's just dead, the deck struggles a lot. Um, Now I think control handles it a little bit better than aggro, obviously, but
Hmm.
it's still once Hrothgorn's gone, and I mean 6 damage is a lot, but there are definitely some builds right now that can put out 6 damage in a single activation.
Hmm.
And if they do, then all of a sudden your world becomes very scary, and you've probably lost that game, especially if it happened early in the game.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess I I mean, if you're playing objectives, you might be able to just outrace pretty well because his glory cap isn't super high, unless he gets like a whole bunch of glory from kills. Um, and then otherwise, if you can blitz him, if you can, find a way to put a big chunk of damage on him, that's
Hmm.
definitely gonna get in the head of the Hrothgorn player. They're not gonna like that one bit.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I did just recently lose a game to a Hrothgorn who spent 7 or 8 activations on 1 health, and I could not find a way to get that
Oh
last one off.
no. Oh
So it
boy.
was
Well,
it was painful, but
sometimes.
it was making it was some like desperate plays. Like, okay, well, I guess I have to do this risky thing, and he was making the correct decisions, and
Yeah, and you just couldn't.
and pulled it through, and I couldn't quite close the door on it, but it forced him into some much less comfortable plays. So,
Sure.
so
So that's sort of who I've seen as like one that I think is definitely in the cut. Who are you putting in there as a for
well,
sure?
we've already mentioned them a number of times with Grimwatch,
Yeah.
and until proven otherwise, kind of top dogs right now, multiple grand clashes in a row. And I think with Grimwatch, you it's unlike Hrothgorn where like, oh, is this going to be control? Is this going to be aggro? You kind of know, like there's not a lot of mystery about what they're going to do. They're going to stand on objectives and get a ton of glory for it. And the devil's in the details for them. Like what do they put their other resources into? But it's often then with enough aggro counterpunch to fight you off. I think, I mean, the default strategy you have against Grimwatch is deny that inspire. Um, I even to the point of letting them score. If I have to pick between denying the inspire or letting them get the score, usually let them get the score because they're probably going to get it anyway. Deny the inspire and make my next few rounds that much easier. I think with Grimwatch, you should know what you need to do, and it's just how well you can execute. There's not a lot of doesn't feel like there's a ton of surprises there at this
I
point.
I would definitely agree. I think maybe the only surprise factor could be like how flex are they?
Mm-hmm.
Because like if we looked at Sandro's deck, from the Grand Clash that he won, he had quite a bit of aggro tech in his upgrades.
That's
And
true.
he was relying on things like Tome of Offerings and Trophy Belt to get some extra glory, if you can imagine that, for coming out with like Crack Marrow and chopping
Sure.
people up. So um, I think that would be something you just have to feel out in each
Hmm.
game to see like how conservative is this player going to be versus are they going to come and smash my face with
Yeah.
super crazy charges.
Yeah. I mean, I can say an example of that I got to play a remote game against Radek from Miniature Fight Club, and he was a lot more aggressive with his Grimwatch. And my clue there was deployment instead of the Duke being way at the back. I was like, what is he doing in midfield? Like, oh no,
Oh,
he's coming after me.
yeah. All right.
Uh,
Here we go. Scritch
and
style.
so you may be able to pick up some clues from that. Yeah. So Grimwatch, who else we got up there?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the other boogeymen, the thorns.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of doing the same deal. Although I would say that there's a little bit more variety with thorns, although not a lot. You're pretty safe knowing that they're going to try and hold objectives, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that some people are putting in a bit more aggro of late than just holding objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think now that we've got enough of the, some of these interesting weapon options that you could put on chain rasps, and then between the queen and the everhanged, they can actually put out a decent amount of damage, and they're pretty quick. So I know some people, depending on how they draw into their objectives, like to start aggressively to try and sort of get your opponent on the back foot. Um, so there's one other thing to sort of watch for, but it's it's the same kind of problem where they're probably going to want to do things like temp victory, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Specifically because of what's his face, Varclav.
Mm.
Being able to push a whole bunch of fighters as an action onto objectives means that if they got 3 objectives and they happened to have a temp victory in hand, they're getting 2 glory, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. I would say that one good distinction between Thorns and Grimwatch is that in Grimwatch, I feel like I'd almost rather give them the objectives so that I can have place the boards and then get in to deny the inspire.
Yeah.
Um, Against Thorns, I feel a little less pressure to do that, just because I don't have to work so hard to deny the inspire. So I'm more willing to accept an offset board if I think I have the tools to work that, and then try to fight them off of the objectives I have.
Oh, definitely. And I think from games that I've played with, especially with Control Hrothgorn, it felt like if I could get 3 objectives and have to have them come to me to be able to score their things like Supremacy and Temp Victory, that felt like a really strong play.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, a lot of their fighters, even if they can hit kind of hard, they can't usually take much of a hit. Chain
Sure.
rasps
Yep.
die to a breeze.
Yeah.
So I think if you are even remotely aggro, you should feel at least okay, because with
Mm-hmm.
thorns, if you can kill their chain rasps, they're gonna start to feel the pressure.
Yeah. And then I guess I agree. Kill the chain rasps, and then if the other player happens to use Varclav or the Queen to sit in an objective, that is the one to disrupt, because that is not as easily recovered.
Yep,
Varclav can recover the other ones more easily. So if you've got something like I can't kill a chain rasp, but I can disrupt an objective, maybe Restless Prize or whatever the case may be, or a distraction. The person to distract is if you notice the Queen or Varclav sitting on something, that's a more efficient use of that in general.
for sure. And I think maybe just one more thing to call out here in the denial of, at least for both of these, Grimwatch and Thorns, is if you can effectively destroy objectives and just get rid of them from the game, um, there's at least the potential for making their life very difficult, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their glory depends on objective tokens. And if you can
Mm-hmm.
take 1 or 2 of those out of the game, um, their objective hands might just brick.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you have to have a reason for destroying objectives. You can't just
Mm-hmm.
bring objective destruction stuff for no reason.
Right, exactly. Let's talk the other ghost, Mournflight.
Oh boy.
I think they're firmly part of the cut. And here, what's horrifying to me about them is that it always feels like I got just bad options against them, right? Like
Yeah,
if you let them sit back, they often have enough passive that they can if there's minimal engagement, they're happy. They can score enough. On the other hand, if you rush them, then they go zipping right through you, inspire up, and become really a bunch of jerks to try and take down.
I sure do.
Uh, so
Yeah. What I guess I have some ideas of how to deal with them, but what have you felt have been your best ways of dealing with them?
Uh, so sometimes it's as simple as, I mean, there you can do some work with where you put objectives. So this is a really good warband to practice placing objectives on. We talked about them some. It sometimes as small as like the board selection. Not putting down a board with block texts if you can help it to make that
Yeah,
inescapable vengeance. I want to say.
I think that's the one.
A little bit more difficult. But where you place the objectives, because you know that they're going to try to move through or stand on them, especially if you know they're looking for one will, the odd and the even.
Hmm.
There's you can kind of predict that. So shifting those using restless prize or standing on it or that sort of thing, making that little bit harder and making them work. And if you can get it to a spot where you can have multiple fighters make an attempt on any banshee stepping on that objective or moving to support that, then you improve your chances quite a bit. I think it's when you let them have both objectives way at the back and you have to really overextend with just one or two that you can get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I definitely would agree. The objective placement stuff is super important. The board placement is super important. Um, but it's just so hard. Like they only need two objectives, so they almost don't care. I've been in some matchups where they would rather offset and just hang back.
Oh, plenty, yeah.
And it's tough, but um, I would say that one thing that I've found that helps is waiting to engage until you've powered up a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, Two dodge sucks when you're first charging in. If you don't have any other ways to like make sure that those first hits happen, that
Mhm.
that is rough in just the worst ways. Um, but if you have some passive scoring and you know that, like, if I just wait back, yes, they're going to score some stuff, but they won't get inspired and I can score some of my stuff. Sometimes just playing a little bit of a waiting game means that when you do go in, you can more effectively actually hit.
Mhm.
Because before they inspire, they do have two fighters who are a little bit susceptible.
Sure.
Um, so I have found that can work, especially when you have a big hitter. So, if you're playing Curse Breakers or Hrothgorn or Grimwatch, you've got somebody in all of those who can hit pretty hard. So if you can sort of wait it out a little bit, you don't want to wait too long because then they just score their whole deck and are like, fine, I don't need to engage. That's cool. And then they'll whatever the one is where they score 3 for having scored more objectives than you.
Sure.
Um, but but I find that, like, if you go in too early and you just get mired in trying to hit their 2 dodge and you can't do it, then all of a
Mhm.
sudden they get inspired and now they're accurate because they all start on
Mhm.
2 swords. So it's like, well, if they dive at you, they're probably not going to hit you.
Mhm.
Um, but I think they are like the ultimate control warband, which one makes them really hard to play, but two means that if somebody's good with them, they're going to be a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah. I've when you say that ultimate control, I've found that often the cards I'm most happy to see in my hand when I'm playing against them is spectral wings, so that I know that I'm not just going on with one fighter. I'll have
Right?
a chance
Yeah.
to power up and then send more than one fighter in, or maybe bypass their fighter who's more powered up and get back to the widow who's trying to sit back and have a chat with her cryptic companion or something like that.
Yeah. Or I mean, I guess, and this is maybe not that common right now, just given the field. But if you have a way to get in snare, they hate in snare.
Hmm.
Um, so if you have like,
Get out
sitting
here,
target,
dissipate.
you got
Yeah.
see, oh yeah, right. If you got sitting target or something that you can throw on your Mollog or Hrothgorn or whoever the big bad on your aggro deck is, you can definitely ruin their day that way.
And I guess the last comment I would say is that I found sometimes pushes on them to be um, more effective than I would expect because they've used so much of their gambits on their triple/quadruple distraction that they
Yeah,
start to run
that's
out of room for
true.
pushes occasionally.
Sometimes
Um,
they don't run things like sidestep and stuff.
right, because they're busy throwing you off your stuff. But um, all right, anyone else you think makes the cut that we'd consider up here?
I think curse breakers.
Oh yeah, sure.
Man, uh, they have they're one. Them and Thorns. They've just been hanging out for 2 whole seasons,
Fact.
and just being monsters. Now, whether so curse breakers, I think again, kind of like Hrothgorn is one where you don't necessarily know what your opponent's throwing down when you see them. Some people build them very aggressive, and that can be super scary because they have some nice buffs and usually a lot of chip damage through their spells. Um, but some people play them super passively and just sit back and cast spells, and they get a whole bunch of mileage out of just sitting in a corner and you know,
Sure.
yeah, it's like, oh look, I can empower twice, and then I can cast whatever the spell version of confusion is, and then do this other thing, and hey look, I score 4 glory this turn because I cast some spells. um and it kind of forces you to have to engage with them, but they're tough enough and they hit hard enough once they're inspired that you don't really want to engage with them. So
Sure.
um both ways I think kind of suck, but I think they at least in my experience, both playing them and playing against them, they don't like anybody who can get in their face early and stop them from casting some of their spells.
I was going to say exactly that. Early aggression is pretty challenging for them. If you
Yeah,
get in before Rassus and Amos empower, if you get in and lay some damage on Stormsire before he gets to 2 block, these
yeah,
are all
and I mean the funny thing is that we think about them as being oh, they're these big stormcasts. They're super tough. They're so hard to kill. Well, in a lot of cases, it's not actually that difficult. Between lethal hexes and chip damage and one fast heavy hitter, even if it's just 2 damage, you can usually hit them, drive them back, and then throw a pit trap or something, or snare, or cast your own spell, or whatever it is, or even just a distraction, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, one of them's dead. Now they have
hmm
2 fighters left.
hmm
They're running on almost no activations, and I think that's probably their biggest weakness is having only 3 fighters. Means that if they lose anybody, all of a sudden they're feeling pretty pretty bad about that game.
right, right, right. With the possible exception of the double Stormsire, but even that I've found early
Yeah,
aggression is potentially a problem because I would lose. I've played a bunch of double Stormsire to Hrothgorn of late, and perhaps I'm playing too aggressive, but I'll lose Stormsire early. Inevitably, freaking Thrafnir will charge and just get his 3 swords versus 2 block. We'll just go flying through, and then I'm like, oh, now I'm on 2 health, and I'm in trouble. And
yeah,
uh, so it's a similar thing where there's a backup plan, but the backup plan only works if you have a chance to generate glory before Stormsire goes down. So early aggression, particularly on Stormsire, can be a big deal against him.
yeah,
Uh, so that I think kind of constitutes what we consider the cut, and your local meta may vary, and by the time this comes out, it may change. And as soon as As soon as we get new war bands, it may change, but just kind of the system, the process of going through this is what we're focusing on. Let's talk about the field. Like what things that aren't necessarily like so common or so powerful that you would need to make sure that you have a plan against them. But what are you thinking that is something you ought to be at least somewhat prepared for in the field?
So I think I will maybe say there's like a group of the field that are kind of on a bubble where they could maybe, depending on how many of them are played and how your local meta looks, actually sort of fit in the cut and not in the field. And so I think Rippas kind of fall in that area. I think Thundrix kind of fall in that area. Um, has yet to be seen, but maybe Wormspat too. Um, and so with without having wanting to spend too much time on the field, just because you won't see as many of them, I think they all have something that makes them scary in some ways, but they maybe don't shine. They're maybe not as well rounded. I guess is maybe the way I would put it, as some of the other cut warbands. So like with Rippas, they're pretty aggressive. I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you pretty much know what they're gonna do, and I think you pretty much know that you're gonna be trying to deny them kills, and if you can, then you're probably gonna be okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of know that dice is sort of their deal. Like they live or die by those wolf bites, probably,
Mm-hmm.
or at least from what we've seen locally with Paven.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think it's definitely one of those where like you know what they're gonna do. You're probably just gonna say, okay, I'm just gonna like if I can, I'll stay away from them, but they're kind of fast. So I'm probably just gonna hope that they miss a lot of those wolf bites. And if they do, there's only three of them, and they won't be able to just you know keep piling on once I start
Mm-hmm.
to come back at them. Um, Thundrix, uh, I think again, it depends on how they're being played, but they're going to want to shoot the crap out of you one way or another.
Sure.
And they're really slow. So in some ways, if you know that you don't need to engage with them, so like if I'm playing Curse Breakers and I win boards on Thundrix, I'm just going to longboard them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know that if like, hey, if I'm aggro and I'm going into Thundrix, you probably don't like that matchup very much.
Maybe it is a thing where like if they can just shoot the one or two people who come at them, then they're super happy. I have had some downfall with Thundrix when that thing we were talking about earlier, early aggression. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
if they lose some fighters before they really start powering up and getting improved defense and increased health and increased damage output, knocking fighters down early and often can really put them in a tough spot. And I feel like we've mentioned that a few times. The early aggression, I think, this is part of that prep. We were talking about it's making your deck, but it's also practicing. And so knowing, if I've got Reavers, I'm probably taking some of those early risks if I have that chance at Thundrick, if I have that chance at Stormsire, if I have that chance at Wrathborn to lay some early damage
Yeah.
or even a potential killing blow. You need to take those opportunities because that may be your best shot. It's knowing, hey, is this 60% shot early in the game? Is this my best opportunity at the game? Because sometimes you can, and this is a particular weakness of mine, is I will shy away from that often. I'll say like, like I don't want to put the whole game on the line on this attack. I'll wait. But really all I'm doing is, you know,
Delaying.
delaying. And when it finally comes time to actually pull the trigger on it, well, now I'm down to like a 30%, or worse. So,
Right.
um, that's the practice side, is knowing when is your best chance, and how bad can it get. So if I see an opportunity that's good enough, when do I take it?
Sure. So those are a few that I think sort of fall into the field. Where are you seeing some stuff that you think is in the field?
Well, it's I think there's a lot sort of down in the soup here from the objective point of view. I think gits are floating around there. I uh, I think they're a tier below the thorns and Grimwatch. Some because they can bleed so much glory
Yeah,
with
for
their extra
sure.
fighters. But they have they have their own unique mechanics and their own passive scoring, and so it's something to be prepared for. You need to know how big a problem is Snurk for me, and what am I going to do if like how am I going to handle Snurk? Am I going to do I have the ability to stay away from him? Do I have the ability to kill him even if he's inspired?
Hmm.
Um, so that's an example of the Gits considerations. You mentioned Wormspat. I think that's worth having some reps into. If for nothing else, as a new warband, people are excited about them. People are, maybe not as much as Hrothgorn, but there's people who are really. I mean, I put myself in this group, really enjoying like trying to figure out that puzzle. And so those are people who have a lot of reps with it. So if you see someone bringing them, they probably have a ton of reps. So don't take that for granted and
Yeah.
have some sense of what they're trying to do. Um, often they will set up something for something like they may be doing a seeping rot steadfast defender sort of thing, in which case if you have two equally viable options, don't swing at the person on an objective.
Definitely.
So I think that's one worth at least getting a few reps or some thought about. What about you? Any other?
Um, I think the only other things that I'd mention in the field right now are sort of the aggro outliers, I guess is maybe how I would term them. So you've got Skaiths, Mollog, and both Corn warbands, I think, kind of fit into this. And they tend to be really aggressive, and they can be really scary if they can get into your face. And like they're all going to be scary in different ways, but I think I think in some ways these hyper aggro builds are going to be the ones that ruin your tournaments. They're
Mm,
probably not going to win, but they might ruin your day.
mm-hmm.
um, because if they can get in and get some lucky rolls, they're probably going to steamroll you.
Sure.
Um, I mean I say lucky rolls, but I mean like seriously, if Mollog comes in on 2 dice into like 2 dodge because you're playing more in flight and you're like, it's probably fine, but he just happens to like hammer crit that. All right, well, see a ghost.
Yeah.
um, and once Mollog starts rolling, he's really hard to stop.
Mm,
So it's just one of those things where like I think for each of these, there's a different comfort level of like how far away do you need to be? How accurate do you think they're going to be? How many models can they take off? In a given activation.
mm-hmm.
I think Skaith actually is probably one that doesn't get enough love considering how well they've placed recently in some tournaments, but um, they are super fast. And if you're not careful, you're probably going to get caught out with some of your, softer pieces, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
come in and scoop up some easy glory so that they can get rolling.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. Um, I think as we get to the end of what we're talking about with the cut, like maybe we're I'm not saying any particular ways fit in the oddball, but when we talk oddballs, it's this is where like even there's going to be builds that you don't expect. There's going to be war bands that you haven't seen in a long time, and this is where we're having a flexible build gives you some ability to adapt to some of those on the fly to uh, adapt in your best of three. And this is where like playing even getting a game against Iltharis and having
right.
an understanding of how Galen how his reaction works and like how problematic is that for you, having knowing that Godsworn and Skaiths are often pretty interested in knocking down a 4 wound fighter. So if you only have one or two of those, consider protecting those because those are worth often they're worth 2 extra glory against each of those war bands. for Hunt's End or for worthy worthy deed, worthy kill.
Or
I
both.
can't remember which one. Yeah, yeah. Porque no los dos. Um, or we'll go with your example with Zinch. Knowing what's going on with the horror, having a sense of like how does that horror operate? Like even especially if you have not played as many games, just having seen that once often can give you a huge head start when you do
Yeah.
encounter that oddball on the day of.
And I guess super secret tech here, and maybe it's not so super secret, but I caught people off guard. Since objective meta is really strong right now, if somebody is playing things like Restless Prize or um, what's the one where you can move all of them? Shifting Mischievous
Mischievous
Spirits.
spirits.
Uh, if an Eyes player moves the objectives onto starting hexes, they can guaranteed either summon a blue horror onto the objective or teleport onto the objective.
Right.
So watch out for that,
Look.
because they can very quickly suddenly show up on objectives where you probably didn't expect them to.
Same with rats coming back, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Yep. They can do the
um,
same thing.
and so just playing against those warbands gives you at least, okay, I've seen that trick, or I've been made aware of that trick, and so now it's not like a total shock. I might have that, at least the spider sense tingling when it starts to get set up in the field. So
Yep.
um, I guess what we're saying is a lot of thought cycles, a lot of reps going into stuff against the cut, things in the field that you'd expect to see, but there's still value in playing against all kinds of different war bands out there to get a sense of so they don't ruin your day on your way to the glorious top 16 or whatever
Yeah,
it may be.
for sure. Well,
Any other thoughts for you?
I think, I mean, the field's a lot more straightforward. I mean, I think generally it's sort of like, if you know your game plan and you're not caught completely off guard, you should probably be pretty good no matter who you're going up against, if it's one of the less common warbands.
Mm-hmm.
So some oddballs, eh? What is an oddball? What do we consider an oddball?
It's the stuff that you can't necessarily plan for. So, or that's really out there. So, like we'll say, I don't know, like objective Iron Jaws or something like that.
Sure.
Like that.
Yeah.
There was an Italian deck that was put together that was actually pretty good. I played it. A few times. It's pretty powerful, and but that's not what you're going to expect when you roll up against Iron Jaws, right? Like and so things like that, or people talk a lot about the Lost Pages build, but I haven't played against it yet.
Yeah.
So there's there's these wild cards out there, or warbands you see very infrequently, like Steel Hearts or Condemners. If somebody's taken the time to go to a big event and bring those, they've probably practiced a bunch with them. So, even if it's not what you're expecting to see, that's what we're talking about with some flexibility, understanding your own game plan, and being prepared to best to three it and adapt if you go down in that first game.
Yeah. I would definitely say with these oddballs, like if you start seeing something and you're just like cannot for the life of you figure out what the hell's going on, just play that match out as a scouting mission and know that you're probably losing that first game, because they probably expected that you wouldn't know what they're doing and they're going to be able to beat you because you had no idea what was going on. But if you can figure it out in one game and sort of know, oh, that's what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
you can come back and win games 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tome's Mollog was like the perfect example of that, where, people are like, oh man, it's Mollog. I'm going to hang back. I'm not going to get close to him. He's going to kill me. And then all of a sudden they're like, and he's reading books. Oh, crap.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. That's where I made a lot of my ground at ATC, was usually he's getting the first game totally off of that oddball surprise factor. And sometimes that's all you need. So And yeah, maybe we were saying oddball, but maybe shout out to Mad Skulls. Maybe it's your Mad Science deck. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like if
uh,
you've never seen, well, I mean, now people are aware of it, but if you had never seen like hungering, festering before, and suddenly all this, this crazy suicidal rat stuff starts popping up and it's like blowing your guys up, you'd be like, what the heck is going on?
yeah, exactly. So uh, I think that is mostly our thoughts on that. I guess we should mention we're talking because Adepticon has been on our minds. We're talking about a large event, Adepticon size. But a lot of this will go into your planning process for your local events and stuff. And so, you have any thoughts on how it changes if you're doing a smaller or a local?
Yeah, I think mostly what changes is that you're probably a little bit more aware of who is going to be at your events, and what they're going to be playing. And so I think you can have a much better idea of, well, for one thing, there's really not a field end cut. You really just have a cut, for lack of a
Yep.
better term. Um, you've just got your top stuff. You know who's playing what, and you know who's good at playing what. So even if, so say like, the big fish in your pond really loves to play, rippas. And normally we wouldn't maybe consider rippas to always be, top tier, but because they're really good with them, that you need to be ready for rippas no matter what. Cause you know, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be at the top table against you. Um,
Mm.
it sort of means that you need to change some of that planning, knowing that, um, these certain people are going to be playing specific things that you're aware of. But I think otherwise, everything else stays exactly the same. The play
Mm.
styles, the game itself doesn't change. It's just what's the distribution, and so
Hmm.
your planning can be a little bit different.
Yeah, it can be more specific, I suppose. So,
I think you can,
um,
and maybe to put a finer point on that, you can take some more risks in your play style because you can know more precisely what you can just dodge outright.
that's a good point. Sure, you have a better sense of what you don't have to worry about. We have a local coming up this Sunday, and
Yeah.
I can say I'm pretty sure I'm safe from reavers, and like I don't have to put a ton of time
Yeah.
into thinking the
Right.
reavers. I don't think we have anyone locally playing that. On the flip side, I know I better be thinking about banshees, and
Yep.
I know like I need more reps into Hrothgorn because Phil's gonna uh, eat my lunch with that. So, um, so yeah, right, exactly. Adapt to the specifics of your area. So, um, I think that might do it. We're about out of time here, so should we
Yeah.
wrap up?
Let's wrap it up.
All right. So as always, thanks to everybody for listening, for giving us comments when we put the episodes up. They're read and they're greatly appreciated. We if I see them, I make sure to go share them not only with Phil but with the rest of the Mortal Realms team. I think everybody gets a kick out of seeing that. So your comments and feedback are always greatly appreciated. And if you want to give us that, you can do that at on Twitter at WHHcast, what the heck's cast at gmail.com. Both those are in the show notes. You can always get at any of our shows at themortalrealms.com. Coming up, we may be doing an Adepticon wrap. We may not. We'd really love to get another cornisode. Might be looking for Matt Martin, our chief corn correspondent,
Oh,
in
yeah.
on that. Um, we still have a Gitsisode on the way, working on that. So those are all in the mix. If there's something you especially want to hear, let us know. In the meantime, your recommended listening for this episode was "Know Your Enemy" by Rage Against the Machine. And for What the Hex, I've been Davy.
And this is Phil.
Or themortalrealms.com/Patreon if you want to throw something in the tip jar to to do Patreon stuff. Oof. All right. You can always get all the information or all the oof. I am messing this up. You can always get. But before that, a little bit of context. We're recording on the 11th of March, and we got to see Morgaith. More.
I think it's Morgwaith. I think there's a
Morgaith.
W in there.
I think so. That's so.